If you've got type 2 diabetes and you're trying to make lifestyle changes, it can feel like you're being shouted at from every direction. Low carb, keto, Mediterranean, plant-based, calories, fasting, and you're sat there thinking, where do I even start? And what do I do if I do it wrong? So in this video, we're going to talk about low carb versus keto, what the difference is, what nutritional ketosis actually means, and why these two approaches might not be as different as you think, especially when it comes to improving your blood sugar. And I also want to talk about the bit that doesn't get enough attention, not just how to get your blood sugar down quickly, but how to keep it down for the long term. Because in my experience, that's where people either build real health changes or they end up swinging from one extreme to another and finding themselves back where they started. And just so you know where I'm coming from, I'm Neris, I'm a GP, and I've been helping people improve their blood sugar or blood glucose and reverse type 2 diabetes with lifestyle changes for nearly a decade now. I work with people right across the spectrum. Some do brilliantly with a gentle low carb approach. Some need something more structured and more restrictive for a period of time just to get control. And some people try keto, get great results, and then struggle to maintain it when real life kicks in. So my aim in this video isn't to push you into one camp, it's to help you understand the difference, understand what matters most for your health, and to choose an approach you can actually stick with. Right, let's start by getting really clear on the definitions, because most of the confusion does start there. So when people say low carb, they're usually not talking about one exact diet. Low carb is actually a spectrum. It simply means you're eating fewer carbohydrates than the standard modern diet. And for most people, that means cutting back on things like bread, pasta, rice, potatoes, breakfast cereals, biscuits, cakes, those sugary drinks, fruit juice, and a lot of those snacky ultra-processed stuff that's basically carbs in disguise. And instead, you're building your meals around protein, so meat, fish, eggs, Greek yogurt, tofu if that's your thing, plus non-starchy vegetables and healthy fats to help you feel full and keep that blood sugar steadier. Now, the reason low carb can work so well for type 2 diabetes is pretty straightforward. Carbohydrates have the biggest impact on blood glucose, so if you reduce them, usually reduce the spikes. But here's where the confusion starts. What about keto? So when people say keto, they usually mean a ketogenic diet, which is basically a more restrictive version of low carb. The goal with keto isn't just to lower the carbs. The goal is to lower the carbs enough that your body goes into something called nutritional ketosis. This is where you start producing ketones and using fat as a major fuel source. And just to be clear, ketosis isn't a moral achievement. It's not a badge. It's simply what happens when your carbs are low enough for long enough. For most people, that means the carbs are kept very low, often around 20 to 50 grams a day, usually towards the lower end, although it does vary person to person. And that's why keto is different. It's a much tighter set of boundaries. But here's the bit that surprises people. Low carb and keto have a lot of overlap. With both approaches, you will end up eating more protein, more vegetables, more whole foods, and fewer of those sugary, starchy carbs. And in both approaches, blood glucose will improve because you're reducing the biggest driver of those glucose spikes. So the real difference is not that one is good and one is bad. The difference is usually how low you take the carbs, how quickly you want results, and how restrictive it feels in real life. And this is where the conversation usually gets heated. People argue about what's best, when the real issue is the trade-off between restriction and sustainability. So here's what I see. A stricter approach like keto can work brilliantly in the short term. Blood sugars can down quickly, appetite drops, cravings can quiet completely once you ride that initial withdrawal, and it feels like a different type of energy. But then, of course, real life turns up and people struggle with strict. And when it breaks, it often breaks with a snap. You get this surge of feelings, I've blown it, you want to eat everything, you feel guilty, panic, and then you start hunting for the next plan. And if you tend to be an all or nothing, extremes can be risky. Not because they never work, but because the rebounds can be quite brutal. Your body likes stability. Big swings tend to trigger big responses. More hunger, more stress, and that feeling of either being on it or failing. So yes, lowering the blood glucose quickly does matter, But keeping it down is what really changes your long-term health. I've seen people get into remission, but I've also seen people lose that again because the plan that got them there wasn't the plan they could live with. So I want you to think, instead of labels, think in levels. You're not joining a camp, you're choosing a strategy you can repeat on an ordinary week. So in general, keto suits people who feel calmer with firm rules and want a structured reset, as long as they've got a plan for real life. Moderate low carb suits people who need flexibility, family meals, and something they can stick to long term. And plenty of people do best with a phased approach, tighter at the start, then easing into a sustainable low carb kind of forever version. And whichever route you choose, the foundations overlap. So you start with protein at every meal, non-starchy vegetables. Be intentional with your carbs. Build a plan for the version of you who has a normal life, not the version of you who's perfectly motivated. Because here's the simple truth. You do have to choose a starting point. Otherwise, you end up half doing everything and never really learning what works for your body. But remember, you're not signing a contract. You can change your mind about the amount of carbs. You can adjust. There isn't a keto police or low carb committee coming to tell you what you've done wrong. In fact, cycling can be a very sensible approach for some people. So this is when you might go restrictive for a short period to get momentum and then move into more of a moderate low carb approach that you can live with longer term. Or you might start with moderate, see what happens with the numbers, and only tighten things if you actually need to. So rather than getting lost in the weeds, here's what I want you to take away. Low carb and keto aren't enemies, they're points on the same spectrum. Both will improve blood glucose. The difference is how restrictive you make it and whether you can maintain it when life gets messy. So choose a starting point, give it a proper go, watch what happens to your blood glucose and how you feel, then adjust. You're allowed to change your mind. You're allowed to cycle between strategies. And if you do that, if you focus on what you can repeat, not what you can survive, you'll get much further than the person who's constantly starting over. And that's really the goal here. Not the perfect diet, not the strictest plan, just a way of eating that you can live with, which follows these principles, keeping your blood glucose steadier, so it moves your health in the right direction month after month. So if you found this helpful and you want more clear, practical videos like this, subscribe to this channel. I post weekly and I'll help you cut through the noise and focus on what actually works. Thank you.